Oh my days. Just so cool. I love
I,
God, man.
I love God. I love God's sense of humor. I think that that's amazing.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. Today is day 47, and we're going to be covering Numbers 11, 12, and 13.
In Numbers 11, the Israelites complain about food. They receive a lot of quail and later experience a plague. In Numbers 12, Miriam and Aaron speak out against Moses and the Lord rebukes them. Miriam gets leprosy but is then later healed. And in Numbers 13, Moses sends 12 Israelite spies into Canaan. They return after 40 days. Caleb is the only one to say that they should occupy them. Wow. So yeah, we've got just a ton to get through today. A ton.
Yeah. So going to jump straight in here. This quail thing. I love it. I love this story from front to back, man, because it's people getting fed up because they haven't had any meat for a long time. And I can definitely relate to that. Then it goes on to God just going into full, you know what, you want meat, I'll give you meat mode. Because in my translation, it literally says, now a wind went out from the Lord and it drove the quail in from the sea. It scattered them in up to 3 feet deep all around the camp as far as a day's walk in any direction. Like, this is God being like, you know what, fine, have all the quail you want, like absolute tantrum God, which I know God doesn't do tantrums,
No.
but could you imagine 3
Yeah.
feet you're wading through quail for a day's walk? Oh my days, just so cool. I love God, man.
I love God. I love God's sense of humor. I think that that's amazing. It reminds me of my meal last night at a Brazilian steakhouse. If I go to chow, where there was just spits of meat everywhere, people like cutting bits off here and there. But yeah, I mean, it's just a brilliant story, isn't it?
It really
and
is.
I like the fact that I now know that 1 cubit is roughly 1.5 feet, because then when measurements come up, it lets me visualize it better. So there you go.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about maybe a slightly darker side of the frustration and anger that God is showing here. Yep. Again, it's important for us to remember that this is anthropopapism, right? This is just a human understanding of God's so-called anger or frustration. He doesn't experience emotions quite the same as we do, obviously.
Yeah.
He experiences it perfectly himself. But anyway, the people complained about their hardships. Hearing this, the Lord's anger was aroused, and a fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. Numbers 11:1. Now, this is more, I'm posing a question to you, faithful viewers, and watchers and listeners, because I'm really not sure what to make of this. And I sort of brought this up with Adam as well before the podcast. And it might be something to do with the fact it's the outskirts this is the area where the unclean go and so on. So it's just kind of a warning on the outsides. But I don't really know beyond that. And I don't think you do either, right, Ad? So this could be a good one for people to comment on. And
yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I didn't check the Apologetics Bible, which I'm not sure if we've got enough time because we've got so much to get through. But
I'll keep powering through while you have a little read, maybe. Cool. So I think that it's also really interesting. I know that Adam will add some stuff to this shortly, but Moses's character, the fact that he's basically tells God that it's just too much for him at the moment. And so God takes some of the power of the Spirit that's on Moses and he spreads it around 70 other people. So the idea that Moses has been given this much power and this much Spirit, that 70 other people can be touched and blessed by that afterwards, just gives you a sort of an insight into this. And the fact that he is, someone that actually wants to spread the power around and doesn't want to be in the spotlight. So he said, this is skipping to us Numbers 11:29. Moses replied, I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets and that the Lord would put his Spirit on all of them. He doesn't seek his own glory in that way. And that's one of the qualities I can see why God chose Moses. And it had to be Moses because Adam and I spoke about this before the recording. Like, if it were me, the moment I got that staff and I could, create plagues and part the sea and create water out of rocks, whatever, I would do a lot of it to my own glory. I wish that I wouldn't, but I know that I would start to feel that power within me.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
Yeah.
Whereas he doesn't do this.
Absolutely. I'm the same way as you, man. Absolutely, I'd fall into that trap. So neither of these two study Bibles gave anything on 11:1 there. So yeah, if you know the answer to that or have a theory on it, let us know. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, the delegation is such a massive thing, really, because again, it's so easy to hold on to that. I'm in a position of power. I've got to do everything, but to delegate is huge. And actually, it's interesting because it goes on then to talk about how Joshua got jealous. Miriam and Aaron both were sort of like questioning it and stuff, and actually how God rebuked them. And honestly, I can see that from their point of view as well, because for me, living in Africa, dude that I've mentioned a couple of times on here, Steve Lamb, like whenever he went to England, he'd come back and people would just like give him a new phone and they'd give him new trainers and like so many cool things just because like they just gave it to him. And I used to get it was jealousy really, because I was like, how come I don't get all this cool stuff given to me? But actually it's so easy to focus on other people's blessings that you can so easily miss out on how God is blessing you. It's that whole kind of like what's next versus what am I doing while I'm here thing. And don't focus on other people. And we're going to touch on this in a minute as well, where then each of the tribes go out into scout the promised land and they all come back saying, oh, now we can't do this. The giants are too big, etc., etc. Actually, they were told to go and look into where do I have it written down here? They're told to scout the land and what the people are like. They're not told to check out whether or not they can defeat them. Where do you set your focus? And it's a case of either do you run to God and tell him how big your problems are, or do you run to your problems and you tell them how big your God is because you know that your God will overcome them? And that subtle difference, again, it is so important.
It's such an important, I love that, what you just said there, that expression. And it's interesting because the path is narrow, right? Because most people will do the former, not the latter.
Yeah.
Of the 12 scouts, only Caleb came back and said, look, we're going to be able to possess this land. We're going to be able to do this.
And Joshua, right? I think Joshua was in the same boat as well, because I was confused. I thought it was the same Joshua who was the assistant of Moses, but I don't think it was the same Joshua. More above our pay grade. More if people can give us the answers, please do.
Yeah, but you're okay. Let's say it's 2 of the 12 then, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you can understand it to some extent because obviously, so Numbers 13:33, we saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim, and we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So little simile in there for all of you English nerds, of which there's just me. But the idea that you are feel like a grasshopper compared to them, you're going to get squished basically, right? And it's interesting because they felt like that in themselves, let alone the way the Nephilim viewed them that way,
yeah,
right? But yeah, it's like you say, like if you actually think about your problems in the context of how big God is, none of it matters.
Yeah.
Like none of it. It's unbelievable. But one other thing, just quickly, I want to link that to. So in Numbers 11:23, the Lord answers Moses's kind of complaints or his fears and says, is the Lord's arm too short? Yeah. So Moses is still questioning God and God's plan at this stage after everything.
Yeah.
But now 2 short chapters later, actually Moses is the one that says, right, let's go. We can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I love that. I love that as well.
Exactly. And I love how it's saying that Moses, and a lot of the reason I think he could do this is this whole don't let your character don't let your gifting take you where your character can't keep you, basically. And it's saying how Moses was just so humble, like being able to do those things and the miracles and what have you. And it says in my translation in 12:3, now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. But it turns out that you're saying that he wrote this book. So he wrote that about himself, which is kind of an oxymoron.
A bit paradoxical that.
And
but
just to finish, you were talking about being an English nerd. I mentioned to Bevan off camera here that I was really happy because I was quite cultured. On the flight back from England to here, I watched Dead Poets Society on the plane, which I felt was a very cultured film. Turns out, best mate Bevan over there watched the same film on the same flight on the same day.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Anyway, on that note, time to end. Visit the Facebook page, Two Brits and a Bible.
And please consider liking and subscribing to help spread the word of God.